The day I found out my parents had left me nothing in their will was the day I realized I had never truly belonged to them. No phone call, no letter, not even a sentimental trinket. Just a cold, official email from a law firm that read, "No assets allocated," and that was it. After 27 years of trying to be the perfect daughter, after birthdays spent alone, holidays cut short for their convenience, and bending myself into someone I thought they could love, they still erased me like I never existed. But the strange thing is, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel anger. I felt something worse confirmation. Like, deep down, I had always known. I wasn't the golden child. I was placeholder, the invisible one. And yet, 3 days later, as I was sorting through the last of my grandmother's belongings, the one person who had ever truly made me feel seen, I found something that would turn my entire life upside down. It was a small, rusted key tucked inside a sealed envelope with my name written in her elegant cursive. No explanation, no address. Just 3 chilling words scribbled on the flap. "You'll understand soon." I had no idea what door it opened, what secret it was meant to unlock, or how it would lead me to uncover a truth so dark, so deeply buried. It would not only explain why my parents had disowned me, but also reveal the twisted family legacy they'd tried to bury forever. My grandmother, Evelyn, had always been different. She was elegant, mysterious, and fiercely private. While my parents were busy chasing status and saving face at country clubs, Grandma would teach me how to sew, how to plant tomatoes, and how to listen, really listen to people. Her house always smelled like lavender and cinnamon, and she'd often hum old jazz tunes while baking. But there was one rule. I was never allowed in the basement. Not once. As a child, I'd asked why, and she simply replied, "Some doors aren't meant to be opened too early." I used to think that was just her way of being poetic. But now, with this key in my hand and no one left to answer questions, that phrase haunted me. I spent the next 2 days searching her entire house. Nothing. Every lock I found was either already open or didn't fit the key. I was ready to give up, to toss it in a drawer, and forget the whole thing when I remembered the cabin. Grandma owned a small, secluded property 2 hours away in the woods. She used to take me there when I was younger, but we hadn't gone in over a decade. My parents hated that place, said it was beneath the family's image. But Evelyn adored it. She said the trees kept secrets better than people ever could. So I drove there, alone, with a storm rolling in behind me. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled up to the faded red cabin. Everything was exactly as I remembered, the ivy crawling up the chimney, the wind chimes still hanging by the porch, and the silence that wrapped around the woods like a blanket. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and felt a strange chill, not from the cold but from something else. A presence, a memory, a warning. The cabin was dusty, untouched for years. I checked every drawer, every closet. Still nothing. Then I saw it, the old grandfather clock in the hallway. I had walked past it a dozen times growing up, but now, something about it looked off. I leaned in, and there, barely visible behind the baseboard, was a small metal door. My heart pounded as I knelt down and reached for the key. It fit. With a soft click, the compartment opened, and inside was a single wooden box wrapped in red velvet. I pulled it out, hands trembling, and opened it. Inside were dozens of old photographs, newspaper clippings, a faded birth certificate, and a letter, another one from Grandma. But this time, it began with, "If you're reading this, it means they've finally erased you. I'm so sorry, my darling girl. But it's time you learned the truth about me, about your parents, and about why they never could love you the way you deserved." And that was the moment everything changed. The letter in my hand shook as I read it. My grandmother's handwriting had always been delicate but confident. This time, it looked rushed, like she had written it in a hurry, maybe even in fear. "Your father was not always the man he pretended to be," the letter said. "When I was your age, I made a mistake, one that cost me everything. I trusted your grandfather with a business I built from the ground up, only to find out he'd signed it over to your father behind my back. They told everyone I stepped away because of my health, but that was a lie. They forced me out. They erased me just like they're erasing you now. But I kept the truth locked away, waiting for the day someone would be brave enough to face it. My breath caught in my chest. The envelope included photocopies of business documents, letters with forged signatures, even a will one that showed my grandmother as the rightful owner of a property I had never heard of. Evelyn and Company. Healing Gardens. A wellness retreat, apparently. Hidden in the mountains. And the name on the current ownership? Still hers. Untouched. Unclaimed. I sat back, dizzy with questions. Why had no one ever mentioned this place? Why had my parents pretended she was just a retired widow who used to dabble in herbal teas? Because they wanted her erased, her name, her legacy, her power. And me? I was just the next inconvenience. I was her blood, her mirror, and her last hope. And that made me dangerous to them. But the documents weren't the only thing in the box. Beneath them lay a worn, black and white photograph of a young woman no older than 25 standing in front of a large wooden building with the name Evelyn and Company engraved above the door. She looked confident, alive, the opposite of the fragile old woman my parents always described. On the back of the photo were 2 words in fading ink: "Start here." So I did. The next morning, I made the trip. The GPS barely registered the location, and I had to follow a series of handwritten directions Evelyn had left in a small notebook I found hidden in the bottom of the box. The drive took almost 6 hours, up winding roads, through deep forest, past faded trail signs. But when I reached the clearing and saw the lodge, something in me stirred. It was like walking into a memory I never had. The air smelled of pine and old earth. The front door creaked open with a gentle push, and inside, the place was untouched. Time had stopped. Wooden shelves lined with glass jars of herbs, journals full of dried plants and recipes, and on the main desk, a dusty wooden plaque. Evelyn Reynolds, founder and master herbalist. Tears stung my eyes. I imagined her here, younger, full of purpose, helping people, building something beautiful. And they stole it from her. My father. My grandfather. My mother, who always looked the other way. They took everything she built and buried it so deep even I didn't know it existed. Until now. I explored the cabin for hours, discovering letters from clients, photos of events, flyers for retreats from the 1980s and early 90s. She had been somebody. A healer. A leader. A force. But the greatest discovery came when I opened a trapdoor behind the fireplace and descended into a small cellar. Inside were dozens of locked file cabinets. The key she left me opened one. And that's when I found it. A full file labeled, "Family Legal Do Not Destroy." Inside were copies of the original business registration under her name, notarized proof of her sole ownership, and most shocking of all, an affidavit from her attorney detailing how she had been coerced into silence through threats of institutionalization. Her own husband and son, my father, had threatened to declare her mentally unstable if she didn't step away quietly. They even had fake medical evaluations ready. I felt sick. There was also a sealed envelope addressed to the press if anything happens to me. But she never sent it. Maybe she was afraid. Or maybe she still had hope that I would find it first. I returned to the main lodge, sat at her desk, and stared out at the tall trees beyond the window. The storm from the night before had passed. The sky was clear, blue, endless. For the first time in my life, I felt not just connected to her, I felt her courage running through my veins. I wasn't going to let her be erased, and I wasn't going to stay silent like she was forced to. It was time to do something that would finally make them look me in the eyes and see exactly what they tried to destroy. I didn't go home. Not yet. I spent the next 2 days in that mountain retreat scanning, printing, organizing every single document my grandmother had left. I labeled folders. I made copies. I even drafted a letter to a local journalist who covered stories on elder abuse and family fraud. But before I went public, I needed one thing: the confrontation. Not for closure, not even for justice. I needed them to see me, to hear the truth from the girl they tried to erase. I arrived at my parents' house on a Sunday afternoon. Perfect timing, they were hosting one of their usual wine and cheese parties. Dozens of well-groomed people in expensive shoes and louder opinions, mingling under string lights and fake smiles. My mother's eyes widened when she saw me at the door, like she'd seen a ghost. She walked over with a forced grin and whispered, "What are you doing here?" I smiled. "Just delivering something you forgot to leave me." I pulled out the envelope, the original legal ownership documents of Evelyn and Company, along with the notarized statements, proof of forgery, and Evelyn's personal letter. "This," I said loudly enough for the nearest guests to hear, "is what you tried to bury with her. But she left it to me. Every last page." My father walked over, wineglass in hand, eyes narrowing. "You don't know what you're talking about." I stared at him, calm. "No, Dad, I finally do. I know everything. About how you and Grandpa forced her out of her business, how you used false medical reports, how you tried to silence her and then tried to erase me too." The crowd was starting to notice. Whispers, side glances. My mother's face drained of color. "This is not the place for—" I cut her off. "No, this is exactly the place. You always cared more about appearances than truth. So, here's the truth." I pulled out my phone and pressed play. A recording I'd made at the cabin, Evelyn's voice, trembling but clear, reading her own letter aloud. She must have known one day I'd need it. The audio echoed through the speakers. "To my granddaughter, the only one I trust. If you're hearing this, it means they've done to you what they did to me. But you are stronger than they think, and now you have the power to make it right." You could hear a pin drop. When it ended, no one said a word. My father tried to laugh it off, but even his closest friends were backing away. One woman whispered, "Is this true?" I didn't wait for them to lie. I handed the journalist envelope to a trusted neighbor who had always liked Evelyn. "I think the world deserves to know her real story," I said. Then I left. The next week was chaos. The story broke on local news first, then spread online. Woman discovers grandmother's secret business after being cut from family inheritance. People were outraged. Commenters called it a real-life movie. Evelyn became a symbol of strength, of legacy, of women silenced and betrayed by their own blood. And me? I became her voice. The biggest twist? When the full investigation concluded, it turned out Evelyn had never legally transferred ownership of her business. The documents my father had used were forged and invalid. The healing gardens were still legally hers and now legally mine. The retreat became more than just a place of secrets. I reopened it in her honor. I renamed it Evelyn's Truth. People came from across the country to rest, to heal, to feel something real. And every time I walked through those doors, I felt her walking with me. My parents? They went silent. Completely silent. After the legal threats backfired and public opinion buried whatever pride they had left, they moved away. I didn't follow up. I didn't need revenge. The truth was enough. The silence they gave me all those years. Now, I returned it not with bitterness, but with peace. But there's one last thing you should know. 1 month after I reopened the retreat, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single page, a faded photo of my grandmother with a group of smiling women from the 1960s, all wearing the same herb-stitched badge. And scribbled on the back in handwriting I didn't recognize were the words, "There's more. You just unlocked the first door." And just like that, the mystery wasn't over. It was only the beginning.